I specifically said I wasn't going to start out this week with sketching. Yet sketching is the only way to get ideas out of my head down on paper, and I have gotten one well-articulated idea and one terribly articulated idea out of my head. I have no more ideas, so I guess it's time to start messing with some fabric. My name is Leigh. 2 years ago, I quit my corporate job to become a fashion designer, and now we are making my first collection together. This is week 3 of me blogging my collection creation process. There's a lot of interesting things we're going to talk about this week that just naturally came up. One of them is knitwear design, and we'll discuss why. And of course, I'm going to share where we're at with the collection this week. One of the first things that popped into my head to experiment with is crochet in silk organza. I have never crocheted off of silk organza before, but fortuitously, when I was looking for a sample out of my scrap pile, which is why it's great to keep your scraps, it happened to have a French seam on it, which was really easy to use to start testing out what crocheting off of that might look like. The sketch that I have for it is really bad, but I realized as I was crocheting, kind of wandering around, creating some abstract embroidery almost. What's funny is in trying to articulate this idea that I'd had so long ago through this swatch, I realized that there's actually a really interesting concept that I was trying to articulate that wasn't just that juxtaposition of crochet and silk organza, it was actually an organic feeling. Earlier I had mentioned the theme of building, but I don't think it's building. I think it's actually growth. I just didn't know how to articulate yet, but I think that that is a very good sub kind of concept of what I'm trying to achieve. I really love watching the TV show The Bear. So similar to the fashion process. What makes these industries so challenging compared to more of the fine art community, with culinary arts, they're consumed. Then with fashion, you have seasons, you have to keep doing the process over and over and over, and some really great nuggets of wisdom come out of there. In the last episode, Olivia Colman's character gave some great insight. She said, "You have no idea what you're doing, and therefore you're invincible." In this stage of the collection development process, that's really crucial because you need to be able to approach everything with a sense of curiosity, willingness to learn. You have the seeds of these ideas in your head, and in order to let them grow, the best way to do that is to explore, to be curious, try things. The antithesis of that childlike exploration is to go into things thinking that you know what you're doing. So it's better if every time it's like you're doing this for the first time. That's where messing around with different fabric manipulations come in. I really wanted to try the concept of punch needling as a surface decoration. One of the challenges that comes with trying to mix these different mediums is you can't always translate what's used in that art form into whatever you're trying to do it with. For example, with punch needling, which is basically carpet making, what they'll usually put on the back is kind of a glue. So you have this incredible tapestry, and then you'll have glue on the back, which holds these little, essentially just loops that you're punching through in the back in place. In terms of a fabric, if I wanted to do this type of decoration on here, this is infinitely easier to do than other fringing techniques, which usually involve tying knots. So I wanted to come up with a way to do this without having to do all of those knots. I found if you put a bit of nice interfacing on the back, it'll actually hold that in place. I was in New York for Fashion Week in 2017, and this woman walked by. She was wearing this incredible jacket with this piece of artwork on the back, and I just took my phone out. I don't know where the jacket came from, and when I look back at it, I remember it being a lot more 3D in my head than the actual artwork is, but it's something that's really stuck with me. I've always wanted to be able to replicate that concept. It would be easy to just take a carpet and upcycle it or something like that. It's going to be really heavy. So thinking about all of these things, the best solution to emulate that is to do punch needling like this. This is an idea that's been bouncing around my head for like 7 years, and I'm just now having the tools and the means to explore what this might look like in terms of a garment. Oh my gosh, I just had an idea for a hat. Shit, I need to write that down. Okay, let me live try to articulate this idea for you. So I had just ripped out some drawings that I had done back in 2022, and I had seen these like dripping spiky things that were sculptures, but I was like, how cool if that was a hat. I love headwear. But then this summer I was exploring the concept of swim caps, and so I ended up finding this Speedo swim cap secondhand that looks like a vintage swim cap. How fabulous. So we have this as a concept of not an actual swim cap. What if this was a hat? But as I was talking to you, I looked down at this yarn, this just chunky yarn. What if this was made out of this? That could be a really cool idea. But again, we're still in the ideation process. We're not in the make garments yet process. We're in the how can I capture this on the mood board. I'm gonna hang the swim cap with some yarn on the mood board, and that's how we're gonna keep this idea so that when it comes time to start deciding what to make, it's there, and at that point I can decide, is this something that makes sense within where we're going, what we're doing? But that's real time, how ideas come together in a way that I can remember them later when I have time to bring them to life, so to speak. So what is this thing you see behind me? This is a knitting machine. This one is from the 1980s. But other than some computer automations, not much has changed since this was the hottest tech on the market, which kind of makes sense because knitting is one of the oldest ways to make material. Knitwear design, interestingly, is its own field of study when you are pursuing a formal education. Much like being a pattern designer, it's almost like a subspecies of design, if you will. Does it make sense that knitwear design would be split out as a discipline? I think it actually does. A good comparison might be that if you're designing a collection, you might have somebody who actually develops the prints and the fabric. In knitwear design, you are developing the print and the fabric, and then on top of it, you're creating the shapes, which are usually very reliant on what that textile is and how you're making it. So there are a lot more skills that are required. For this collection that I'm working on, I'm not doing tons of knitwear development. But one of the things that I wanted to test out was doing a stuffed tube. So this is the tube. I hand stitched it closed last night. It's looking gorgeous, but this is almost an entire skein of yarn. Now I need to stuff it. Learning is so much fun. I'm not the first person by any means using a blown up knit for the design process. There's a really famous Comme des Garçons 3D piece that I absolutely love. Even within the last year, J.W. Anderson did some very just basic knitting, but using empty kind of tubes. And there's also some really amazing fiber art that uses more of a weaving technique to create that art. For me, the fascination is more about how can I take something soft, a knitted piece or a crocheted piece, and give it structure. That's always something I'm really interested in. Once upon a time, I probably would have used stuffing to stuff this, or wadding. People usually have polyester wadding. You can get wool wadding, which is really lovely. But I also just have a lot of fabric and yarn scraps that I can use to stuff this. So instead of putting plastic in here, I can recycle something. I was not planning on draping today at all, but sometimes you just happen to grab the right materials at the right time and ideas kind of start forming and you just want to see where it takes you. I'm excited to jump into next week and start showing you how we take all of these photos I just took, take all of the ideas on the mood board, and we start creating something that will eventually become a garment using a sketch to do that. It's gonna be really fun. Thank you for watching. Again, I'm Leigh, and I will see you next Monday.